In the year 71 BC, Pompey the Great returned after fighting pirates in the Mediterranean, and took all of the credit in wiping out the slave Spartacus in his revolt. Marcus Licinius Crassus, who had really put down the revolt, in an effort to make a name for himself and not be a third wheel in the triumvirate, decided to get more glory by conquering the Parthians. After becoming governor of Syria, he decided to assemble an army of around 36,000 infantry, and then proceeded to attack the Parthians. The Parthians had duped him at every turn by giving him false guides and luring him out to the desert. Serena of Parthia would be the general who would battle him in the plains of Carrhae. The plains of Carrhae would give his cavalry a large advantage in surrounding the forces of Marcus Licinius Crassus and his army. To avoid a flank attack by the enemy cavalry, Marcus Licinius Crassus decided he would deploy his army into a square formation to protect all of his flanks, numbering around 12 cohorts on each side of his square. From a distance, the Parthian force seemed meager, but then they had their cataphracts, who were armored much like the medieval knight, and would have looked something like this, pulled off their cloaks. This was a very astounding sight to the Romans and had a severe effect on their morale. After trying to charge and break the square, they failed and had to pull back. Serena knew that would not be how he would win the day. Serena ordered his horsemen to surround the square, armed with bow and arrows, and to shoot the Romans at different angles. The very powerful Parthian bows were able to pierce through the Roman shields, and were able to hit their hands and, at some points, skewer them onto the ground. The Romans were practically defenseless. Crassus ordered his men to form the testudo, or tortoise formation, to give them protection from the enemy missiles. The testudo formation was effective because it was able to cover all of your flanks, but it also left you vulnerable in the melee, which Serena ordered his men to charge the testudo. This was very effective and very damaging. The Romans were able to reform and defend off some of the cavalry, which the enemy would simply pull back and begin firing again. Every time Crassus would organize a charge, the enemy would simply pull back and continue firing on his forces. So he ordered his son, Publius, to assemble all of their auxiliary cavalry and Roman cavalry to try to charge the enemy. Here we can see a recreation of the Parthian shot. The famous Parthian shot is when the Parthian soldier would turn around in his saddle and fire a bow directly behind him. This was very effective, especially while retreating, and was able to continue up a nice barrage against the Roman soldiers. Parthian cataphracts had ambushed Publius and his cavalry, which included his Gallic auxiliary cavalry. Publius and his soldiers were surrounded and fought to the death. Publius, during the fighting, was wounded. Seeing as the situation was hopeless, he ordered one of his officers to kill himself. His officers decided to do the same. They were promptly slaughtered. The Gallic auxiliaries dismounted and would wrestle the Parthian cataphracts from off the top of their mounts, and even jump underneath them to disembowel them from below. They were also killed. The Parthians stuck Publius's head atop one of their pikes and presented it in front of the Roman army. The heartbroken Crassus decided to retreat that night. The Romans retreated to their nearby garrison at the town of Carrhae. They were followed by Surena's cavalry. Many of them were killed. There is one story that says 20 of them fought so valiantly, Surena and his men decided to let them be. Crassus was captured, and one source tells us that molten gold was poured down his throat. After the end of Carrhae, in 53 BC, Crassus was dead, so he was no longer part of the triumvirate. This left it between Caesar and Pompey. In 20 BC, the legionary standards were finally recovered.